Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1049B, and today's date is August 15th, 2016, and the title of the episode is, While No One Was Looking, the U.S. Government Carves Up Syria. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. Tomorrow, Tuesday, I'll be uploading an interview with Bix where he breaks it down, how this collapse is going to happen, what's going to happen with your funds in your 401k, in your retirement, and what to expect. So if you have some time, I would sit down and take a listen to it. If you are on the X22 Report email alert system, I'll send you an email as soon as it's uploaded. If not, you can go right over to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, and the video will be there once it is uploaded, and you can view it there. Or you can come over to the X22report.com site. You can view it there, or newsentinel.com. The video will also be on that site. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, over the weekend, we saw out in Milwaukee, things really heated up. There were riots. National Guard was called in. And we can see this was all due to a shooting once again by a police officer who claimed that the officer who shot the individual, that this individual was turning towards the officer holding a gun. Others say absolutely not. The person was shot from behind. Now, we've heard this story many, many times before. This is not the first city this has happened in. But when we look past this, what we see is the powers that be, the elite, like the George Soros, the U.S. government, the central bankers. It continually looks like they're trying to push a situation where they want this to spread across the country. And they keep trying. They keep pushing it. They keep trying it. And they're trying to get traction on it because we can see right now we have a perfect storm coming up this fall with the elections, with the economy completely falling apart, with war around Eastern Europe, Middle East, South Pacific. And if things don't go the way the elite want, we know right now they're going to have some type of state of emergency to postpone the elections. And we continually see this. And actually, it looks like they would like to have this state of emergency just to shut everything down, to take full control of the entire country. And we're going to have to continually watch these situations because we can see that these are happening more often than not now. And as we move forward, as we get closer to the fall, we will see all of this ramp up. And we have been seeing a lot ramp up right now because we can see we're getting closer and closer to that perfect storm. Now, out in Saudi Arabia, we see Russia. They are interested in building a nuclear reactor with Saudi Arabia. And we can see why the United States is putting a lot of pressure on Saudi Arabia, naming them for everything that has gone wrong or any type of false flag that occurred, because this is what the United States does. Every time they make some type of deal, another country makes a deal with Russia or China and not the United States, all of a sudden they become the enemy. And we're starting to see this around the globe right now. We see that Russia and Turkey, they are moving closer together. We know that the United States planned this coup d'etat in Turkey, which completely failed. And we know that Russia and Turkey, they've been talking about becoming closer, reestablishing economic ties, maybe starting the Turkish Stream pipeline. And we know a lot of this has to do with central banks, with the oil pipelines, keeping the dollar on the natural reserves, which is oil. And it always comes down to the same exact thing. And what we're seeing right now is Russia is reporting that the U.S. might be preparing chaos in Macedonia, Serbia, Greece to prevent the Turkish Stream. Now we have to remember, the U.S., they have their own project called the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, TAP, which is in competition with the Russian-Turkish Stream pipeline. And the U.S. made it very clear that they'll do whatever it takes to stop this. And every single time these countries say, okay, you know something, this sounds like a great deal, we'll go ahead with the Turkish Stream, all of a sudden we see terrorism, we see some type of incident occur in each one of these countries, and it happens every single time. I mean, over a year ago, Macedonia was in the line of fire because they were talking about the Turkish Stream pipeline. They were making a deal, and all of a sudden, John Kerry, the U.S. Secretary of State, flew out there and suddenly just announced that, yes, Macedonia now was in the line of fire. And the only reason for Kerry's comment was that Macedonia begun building its part of the infrastructure that would tap into the Turkish Stream. Soon after Kerry made his announcement, all of a sudden we heard about this wiretapping scandal and the subsequent unsuccessful terrorist attack in Macedonia. So Macedonia was beginning the infrastructure build-out. John Kerry flew out there, and then all of a sudden something happened. I mean, think about it. Victoria Nuland visited Ukraine, and then all of a sudden we had the coup d'etat. John Kerry went to Afghanistan. All of a sudden they had the person in there that they wanted to be elected, and that person signed the bilateral security agreement, which allowed troops back into Afghanistan. Very interesting. So we have to watch these areas because we can see something else most likely is about to happen. What they're worried about is that if the Turkish Stream is built, it will be a gas pipeline that feeds into Europe, and this would bypass Ukraine. The whole purpose of getting Ukraine was, one, it was on the border of Russia. Two, it had the gas pipelines which fed into Europe. And three, it had the strategic Black Sea ports. And what happened was the coup d'etat did not work out because the southeastern people said, we don't want to be a part of this. Crimea was taken away because they voted themselves away. And the U.S. was left with the west portion of Ukraine, and Russia decided we were no longer going to go through Ukraine. We were going to go around Ukraine. And this is a problem for the United States government central bankers. And we also have to remember when we had this coup d'etat, Joe Biden's son was put on the board. John Kerry's roommate was all of a sudden introduced into the gas companies. And it seemed like everything was set up for their friends, relatives, to make a huge profit. We see right now that Russia, they are ready to show more proof of what happened in Crimea. Because the United States is out there saying that we've seen nothing, there's no evidence whatsoever. So Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says that Russia is ready to provide the West with more evidence about what happened in Crimea. Now, this is going to be a problem because Russia is very good at presenting the evidence and facts. The U.S. is very good at propaganda and pretending they know nothing about it when they were actually behind it. So this situation we also need to watch. Now, as we can see, NATO is continually using Russian aggression, and they've been moving troops in to the Eastern Europe area. Military assets with the United States troops have been rotating in and out, and they're moving closer and closer to the Russian border. Now, Russia continually says, listen, you're continually moving closer and closer to us, and it looks like it's an act of war. Russia is not placing troops in France, on the border of Italy, on the border of the United States. Russia continually is out there saying to NATO, listen, let's work together. We're not a threat. So Russia, they presented NATO with a specific proposal on restoring military cooperation at the latest NATO-Russian Council meeting. We'll have to see how this goes because most likely NATO, the United States, they don't want this restored because their plan is for war with all those countries that are not controlled by the private Western Central Bank. That's what this is really all about. If you're not with us, you're against us. And I believe that was George W. Bush who said that. What he's really saying is if you're not with our central bank system, guess what? You are the enemy. That's why we went into Iraq, Libya, and all these countries, because they were dealing with their natural resources, selling oil, not using the dollar, and the U.S. could not have this. This is why we've seen war in all of these areas that is continuing. This is why we've seen the refugee crisis. This is why it will never end, because the people, they don't want the United States in there. This is not their government. These governments were put in there by the United States to keep their system, the U.S. government central banker system, operational. Now, Italy is continually out there saying that they have no special op teams in Libya. Now, there are reports that, yes, there are special op teams there. But what Italy will do, and they're ready to consider requests by Libya to help the country establish regular security forces. And they will bring the troops right in there to help out. Which means they already have the troops there. And they're looking for an excuse to say this is why Italy is there, because they've been called out on it. Now, to get these countries involved in the fight in Libya, the United States government central bankers, they usually use terrorism. Right now, there's a warning that Italy might have Islamic State cells operating in Milan. And we're going to have to watch that situation very carefully, because we're starting to see that the United States government central bankers, they use these terrorism hits to bring in more troops and military assets and get these European countries involved and keep them controlled. We need to control Europe. And this is exactly what they're doing. So right now, Italy's security forces, they are on high alert. Now, out in Aleppo, we understand that there are many, many bombings occurring right now. And a lot of times what happens is the United States will bomb a hospital. They'll blame it on Russia. They'll blame it on Syria. And it turns out later on that it was actually the United States and the coalition forces that actually bombed the areas. And they were looking at this recent bombings in Aleppo, where they bombed a hospital, Doctors Without Borders. And they're saying that there are a lot of inconsistencies with the report that came out. And they're saying that a lot of this might have been fake, because the U.S. was trying to pin this on Russia, Syria. Now, when we look at this letter, it appears to be inconsistent with the previous reporting, with 6 of the 15 doctors who signing the document claimed to be pediatricians, despite reports that the last pediatrician was killed in East Aleppo on April 28th. This startling inconsistency can potentially be explained, if there was a new batch of doctors that were recruited, but guess what? There was no new batch of doctors. Another problem with this is that the names that are listed on this report, including Abu al-Bara, Abu Muhammad, and others, well, it looks like they're Islamic State and Al-Qaeda operatives. So there's many inconsistencies in the story that's being put out there, and a lot of it doesn't seem real. And it looks like they're trying to use whatever they possibly can to blame this on Syria and Russia, because we know what's happening there. The United States government central bankers, they're losing the battle in Aleppo. And then we come to find that the U.S. House of Representatives, the Joint Task Force, they released their initial findings on the intelligence analysis of the U.S. Military Central Command, CENTCOM. Now, the report found that CENTCOM leaders distorted, suppressed, or substantially altered the information on the U.S. efforts to combat the Islamic State in a more positive light. Now, basically what they're saying is that in Syria, they were pretending they were making gains. because we tracked and we looked at what was really happening. The Islamic State was expanding during the time the U.S. was bombing in this area, because the U.S. was backing, and still is backing, the Islamic State. They are the proxy army for the U.S. government central bankers. So is Al-Qaeda, so is al-Nusra. And when we look at this, 50% of the analysts within CENTCOM said that the procedures, practices, processes, and organizational structures hampered objective analysis, while another 40% said they had experienced attempts to distort or suppress intelligence within the past year. And they broke this down. Senior leaders were found to modify intelligence assessments to cast a positive spin on CENTCOM efforts to train the Iraqi security forces and combat the Islamic State. In June of 2014, CENTCOM established an around-the-clock intelligence fusion center intended to be the key intelligence gathering body. Well, guess what? There was no fusion, as people whose ideas conflicted with those of senior intelligence were not allowed to participate. Not only were dissenters not allowed to participate in the fusion center, they were also restricted in any efforts to coordinate with other command analysis. Despite whistleblower complaints from inside CENTCOM, the House report found no efforts to correct what was going on in there, because the whole thing was a complete lie. The entire strategy was to have the Islamic State spread across Syria to eventually remove Assad. That was the plan. Well, that plan went down the drain. And we can see they're on another plan, because Russia stepped in. They've been removing the Islamic State. They've lost a lot of land. And we can see that very quietly, the United States is doing something very interesting without really anyone knowing what's going on here. We keep on hearing reports that the United States, their moderate rebels that the U.S. government central bankers support, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, how they liberated Manbij. They're all liberated right now. The Kurdish troops came in. Everything is fine. But really what's happening is, wherever the Islamic State is, they bring in the Kurdish forces, they bring in the moderate al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, those individuals into these areas, and they basically take it over. And what we're finding out in each one of these areas, the people there are reporting that almost immediately after liberating Manbij, Kurdish forces were setting fire to the civil registry and land registry buildings in the city, destroying the records of who owns what property around the cities. The troops are also preventing Arab and Turkmen residents who fled the fighting from returning into the area, even though the Islamic State is gone. So what this tells us is that the United States, as they take over an area, they are slowly creating a separate area and carving out Syria. They're doing it very quietly, without anyone really noticing. And they're doing this city by city, town by town, province by province. And this is how they're going to do it. While Russia is battling the Islamic State, the Kurds, the moderate rebels, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, they're going to be going around carving out these areas, destroying the records, saying that this now is the Kurdish region. This is the safe zone. This is the safe area. And they're doing it very, very quietly. Sergei Lavrov is out there and he's saying every time there is any type of truce, they have noticed that the terrorists, Islamic State, al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, moderate rebels, they add 7,000 to their ranks. They get arms and munitions. And it's a pattern they continually see. Well, this we knew all along. This is why the United States government central bankers want a truce, so they can bring in more terrorists, so they can arm the terrorists. And this is continually happening. Now, out in North Carolina, we see there's a man accused of trying to recruit people to the Islamic State group. And he is saying that he's been paid by the FBI since 2009 to help identify those individuals that would love to go out to Iraq, Syria, or any other destination to be a paid mercenary, or maybe be a patsy later on. And Eric Jamal Hendricks said his codename was Aki, a variation of the Muslim term for brother. And he's saying that the FBI, since 2009, they used him to help find these individuals. Now, when the FBI is out there saying, oh, people are going to the dark parts of the web, they're being radicalized. No, what's really happening is the FBI has all these informants around the United States, around many other countries, where they are recruiting thousands and thousands of these individuals, paying them to become paid mercenaries inside of Syria and Iraq. Most of these people are not Syrian that are fighting in this Syrian war. They are paid mercenaries. Maybe 3% are Syrian. The rest, they're from all over the place. And this is what they've been doing for a very long time. And the FBI, to cover their tracks, they continually set up these patsies to say, we've caught another one. See, we have all these people being radicalized. They were going to blow something up. And that was to cover up their main operation. Now, back in February of 2016, this was episode 904, we mentioned something about tactical nukes, how they were snuck into Syria. And these tactical nukes were brought into Aleppo. And what's very interesting about all of this is that there was a think tank which has called for the withdrawal of nuclear arms from Turkey's Incirlik air base, saying the country is in disorder and it's too close to the Syrian conflict zone where one of these tactical nukes can be stolen and used. Now, this is very interesting because we have this situation right now where the United States government central bankers, their backs are against the wall. They're losing control of Turkey. We know there's these tactical nukes. We had reports that a tactical nuke was snuck into Syria. The question is, are they going to use this as a last resort? This is something that we need to watch. Because if things don't go the way the United States government central bankers want them to go, they will resort to doing something like this. And of course, they'll blame it on somebody else. They might even blame it on Turkey to say they're the ones who decided to do this. They're the ones who stole it to set them up. And this is something we need to watch. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.